gave my parents an ultra-luxury 5-day cruise trip in California with me. When I said, "It's all on me, just relax," my mom smiled. But on the first night, she whispered, "We invited someone else." I turned and saw my estranged brother, the one who stole my inheritance. I stood frozen as he said, "Hope you don't mind some family catching up. I never do things like this. Lavish trips, expensive getaways, dropping tens of thousands of dollars for the sake of relaxation. That's never been me. I work hard, save harder, and spend wisely. But after everything my parents had done for me, I figured they deserved this. So I booked a 5-day ultra-luxury cruise along the California coast. The kind with private suites, gourmet dining, and the kind of service where they bring you champagne before you even ask. I wanted them to unwind, to finally experience something special without worrying about money. When I surprised them with the tickets, my dad chuckled, shaking his head. "This is too much," he said, but his smile told me he was touched. Mom teared up. "Are you sure?" "Of course. It's all on me," I told them, feeling proud. "Just relax and enjoy." And I meant that. I had everything planned: massages, fine dining, a sunset cocktail hour overlooking the ocean. 5 perfect days of peace. I had no idea the trip would turn into the worst mistake of my life. The ship was breathtaking. Our suite had a private balcony, a sprawling living area, and a bathroom bigger than my first apartment. My parents were thrilled. Mom kept running her hands over the soft towels like they were made of gold, and Dad, a man who never stopped moving, actually lounged on the king-sized bed like he didn't have a care in the world. Dinner that night was exquisite. Lobster tails, filet mignon, wine that tastes like wealth. I had just finished a bite of perfectly cooked steak when my mother leaned in slightly and lowered her voice. "We invited someone else." I stopped chewing. The words didn't register at first. "What?" Her fingers tightened around her wine glass. "Just, before you get upset, hear me out." Something in her tone made my stomach clench. I put my fork down slowly. "Who?" I felt it before I saw him. A presence behind me, a shadow I recognized even after 8 years of silence. "Hope you don't mind some family catching up." My entire body went rigid. I turned in my chair, and there he was. Dominic, my estranged brother, the one who had stolen my inheritance. You don't go 8 years without speaking to someone unless something serious happens. Dominic and I had been close once. Not perfect, never perfect, but close. We were only 2 years apart, and growing up, he was the brother who protected me, the one who cracked jokes at the dinner table, the one who taught me how to sneak out without getting caught. And then our parents got older. My dad retired. My mom started slowing down. And then came the talk about the will. I never expected to inherit much. My parents were comfortable, but they weren't millionaires. I had no interest in their money. But there was one thing: our grandfather's house. A beautiful, 2-story craftsman in Monterey, the place where we had spent our childhood summers. I love that house. My parents had promised it to me years ago, saying Dominic had no interest in it. But when the will was finalized, something was off. Mom and Dad were acting strange. My calls went unanswered. They avoided talking about it. And then, one day, I found out why. Dominic had convinced them to sign the house over to him behind my back. I'll never forget that conversation. The cold weight in my chest when my father stammered through excuses. The way my mother cried, saying she didn't want to cause conflict. The way Dominic just stood there, looking smug. "Things change," he had said. "You don't even live here anymore." As if that mattered. As if the memories, the years of history, meant nothing. I walked away that day and never looked back. Until now. Dominic sat down across from me like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Man, it's been a while," he said, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "You look different." I didn't say a word. I was still processing the fact that he was here, on the vacation that I paid for. I turned back to my parents. "You knew about this?" My voice was low, controlled, but I could feel my pulse hammering. Mom sighed. "We thought." "You thought what?" I cut her off, my voice sharper than I intended. "That springing him on me in the middle of the ocean would be a good idea?" "Come on," Dominic said, laughing like this was just some awkward family dinner. "No need to be dramatic." I snapped my head toward him, my hands clenched into fists under the table. "Are you serious?" Mom reached for my arm, but I pulled away. "We just wanted to fix things," she said quietly. "We thought if you two spent some time together, maybe." I let out a bitter laugh. "You thought trapping me on a boat with him for 5 days would fix everything?" Silence. Dominic smirked. "I mean, it's a nice boat." Something inside me snapped. I pushed back my chair so abruptly that it scraped against the floor, drawing a few stares from nearby tables. I could feel the heat rising in my face, my breath coming fast and uneven. I leaned down, staring directly at Dominic. "You stole from me, lied to me, and now you think we can just catch up over dinner." Dominic tilted his head, unbothered. "It was never your house, man. You're acting like I took some huge fortune from you. It was just a house." I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. "Just a house," I repeated, my voice hollow. That was when I knew. He felt no guilt, no regret, nothing. I turned to my parents. You can spend this trip however you want, I said, my voice tight. But I'm done here. And then I walked out. The night air was cold as I stepped onto the deck, gripping the railings so hard my knuckles turned white. The ocean stretched endlessly into the dark horizon, waves crashing softly against the ship. I should have expected this. I should have known they'd pull something like this. But now, standing there alone, my mind spun with something else. I wasn't just angry. I was planning. Because if Dominic thought he could steal from me and walk away unscathed, he had another thing coming. I stood on the deck for what felt like an hour, staring out at the black ocean, the ship's lights reflecting against the waves. My chest was tight, my hands curled into fists. Dominic. I hadn't said his name out loud in years. Had barely allowed myself to think about him. And now, there he was, drinking whiskey at my table like we were just old friends catching up. What the HLL was I supposed to do now? I could demand that my parents send him home. But that wasn't an option, not in the middle of the ocean. I could try to ignore him, but that was laughable. This ship wasn't big enough for that. I needed a plan. A way to make sure he was the one who regretted showing up here. Couldn't sleep either? I tensed at the sound of my mother's voice behind me. She walked up beside me, resting her elbows on the railing. The wind ruffled her cardigan. I didn't say anything. She sighed. Look, I know you're upset. I turned my head sharply. Upset? I let out a bitter laugh. That's an understatement, don't you think? Mom flinched, but didn't look away. We thought. No. Stop. I shook my head. Just stop. You keep saying we thought, but what were you thinking? That we'd sit around drinking cocktails and magically forget what he did. She exhaled slowly, looking down at her hands. I just wanted my boys back. I stared at her, feeling something shift in my chest. I wanted to be furious with her, and I was. But underneath that, I saw what I hadn't wanted to acknowledge. She was desperate. Desperate for this to work. Desperate to fix something that couldn't be fixed. I softened, but only slightly. Mom, this isn't something you can just glue back together. He stole from me. He betrayed me. Tears welled in her eyes. He's still your brother. I inhaled sharply, then turned back to the water. Not anymore. Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. I could hear the waves lapping against the hull, the faint sound of music from the lounge. Finally, she reached out, touching my arm lightly. Please, just try. For me. I clenched my jaw. I'm not promising anything. She gave me a sad smile, then walked away, her footsteps fading into the night. I woke up early, hoping to avoid Dominic at breakfast. But when I stepped into the dining hall, he was already there, sitting right next to Dad, laughing about something like we were all on a family retreat. I almost turned around, but then he spotted me. Hey, Dominic grinned, lifting his coffee. Look who finally decided to join us. I forced my face into a neutral expression and walked over, sitting down across from him. Dad cleared his throat. Morning, son. He was clearly uncomfortable, and I wasn't sure if it was because of me or the situation. Morning, I muttered, grabbing the menu. The silence stretched for a few moments. Then, of course, Dominic had to break it. So, he said, leaning forward with that same smug smile he always wore when he thought he was getting away with something. How's life? What have you been up to? I lifted my coffee, taking a slow sip before answering. Oh, working hard, paying my own bills, not stealing from my family. Mom visibly winced. Dad sighed. But Dominic? He laughed. Man, you're still on that. He shook his head, reaching for a piece of toast. I thought we'd be past that by now. I set my coffee down with a sharp clink. Past that? Yeah, he said, biting into his toast like we were just chatting about sports. It's been 8 years, man. You're still holding a grudge. A grudge. I clenched my jaw so tightly it ached. Mom opened her mouth like she wanted to step in, but I cut her off. You don't get to decide how long I stay mad, Dominic. You took something from me. He rolled his eyes. It was just a house. Just a house. I stared at him, something dark bubbling in my chest. I could have let it go. Could have walked away, let him think he'd won this round. But no, not this time. I leaned forward, mirroring his posture. You know what's funny, Dominic? I said, keeping my voice casual. I ran into Uncle Ray a few months ago. Dominic's smirk faltered slightly. I kept going. He told me something interesting. Said that after Grandpa passed, he made a backup will, just in case anything happened to the first one. Dominic's entire face changed. The shift was small, but I caught it. The slight stiffening of his shoulders, the way his fingers twitched slightly against his coffee cup. I smiled. Oh, that got to him. Dad frowned. What are you talking about? I ignored. I didn't think much of it at the time, I continued. But now? Now I'm wondering. What exactly was in that second will? Dominic's smirk returned, but it was thinner now. Forced. You're full of crap. Maybe, I said, tilting my head. But maybe not. Silence stretched between us, thick and tense. Mom shifted in her seat. Please, she whispered. Let's just enjoy breakfast. I sat back, letting the tension settle. I wasn't done, not by a long shot. But I wanted Dominic to think about what I had just said. Let it eat at him. Because if there was one thing I knew about my brother, it was this. He only played it cool until he thought he might lose. And I was about to make damn sure he did. Dominic didn't say much after breakfast. He made a half-hearted attempt at some small talk with Dad, but I could tell my words had gotten to him. His shoulders were stiff, his jaw just a little too tight. Good. I let him stew in it. Let him think, wonder, worry. Because what Dominic didn't know, what he had never known, was that I wasn't the same person I had been 8 years ago. Back then, I walked away. I let him take what he wanted, let him manipulate our parents, let him believe he had won. But this time, I had a plan. The next 2 days, I played along. I kept things light. No more biting comments, no more accusations. I let my parents believe I was warming up to Dominic. At dinners, I laughed when he made a joke. When Mom suggested a family photo, I actually stood next to him. I even accepted his offer to have drinks one night on the upper deck, just the two of us. And the whole time, I let one carefully crafted thought fester in his head. There's another Will. I knew how Dominic operated. He had always been the kind of guy who needed control. He manipulated, twisted the truth, bent people to his will. But the second he thought he was at risk of losing something, that's when he panicked. And I made sure he did. On the 4th night, I made my move. We were in the ship's lounge, sipping cocktails, the dim glow of the chandeliers making the room feel even more intimate. Dominic had been quieter than usual, his usual smug confidence cracking just a little. So, I said, stirring my drink. I made some calls before this trip. He froze for just a second, a flicker of tension in his jaw. I smiled. Hook, line, and sinker. Turns out, I continued, keeping my tone casual. There was a second Will. You know, the one Uncle Ray mentioned. I took a slow sip of my drink, watching his fingers tighten around his glass. Interesting thing about legal documents. They don't just disappear. There's always a paper trail. Dominic's mask slipped. Just for a second. You're lying, he muttered. But his voice wasn't as steady as it should have been. I shrugged. Maybe. But are you willing to bet on that? Silence. He stared at me, calculating, his mind racing. I could practically see the gears turning, trying to figure out whether he had actually missed something. I leaned in slightly. If I were you, I said, lowering my voice just enough to make him nervous, I'd be worried. Because if there's proof that Grandpa left that house to me. I trailed off, letting the weight of my words sink in. Dominic swallowed. Then what happens to you? I finished. And there it was. Fear. Not much, just a flicker, but enough. Because he knew. Knew that if a second Will did exist, if he had taken something that wasn't legally his, he could lose everything. The next morning, he was gone. Just vanished. No goodbye, no excuse, just a text to my mom saying something had come up, and he had to leave early. But I knew better. I could picture it perfectly. Dominic, pacing in his suite, panicking, making frantic calls to lawyers, digging through old documents, terrified that everything he thought he had stolen was about to be ripped out from under him. And the best part? There wasn't a second Will. At least, not that I knew of. I had lied. Played him the way he had played everyone else his entire life. And just like that, he ran. Coward. Mom was heartbroken, of course. She kept saying how she wished things had gone differently, how she just wanted us to be a family again. But deep down, I think she understood. Dominic was never going to change. And for once, I wasn't the one who walked away. He was. When we got back from the cruise, I did something I hadn't done in years. I drove to Monterey. I hadn't been to my grandfather's house since before the betrayal, hadn't let myself see it because it hurt too much. But now I needed to. When I pulled up to the curb, I just sat there, staring at it. The familiar wooden porch. The blue shutters. The big oak tree out front where Dominic and I used to climb as kids. It still felt like home. But it wasn't mine anymore. I let out a slow breath. Maybe that part of my life was gone. Maybe I'd never get the house back. But Dominic? He would never be able to enjoy it now. Because every time he walked through that door, every time he tried to convince himself that he deserved it, he'd hear my voice in his head. What if there's another Will? He'd spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, wondering if I had set something in motion. If one day he'd wake up to find it all taken from him. And that was enough for me. I stepped out of my car, walked up to the house, and rested a hand on the old wooden fence. Then I smiled. Because for the first time in years, I felt like I had won. And the best part? I never had to lift a finger. Dominic had destroyed himself.